Hello everyone, I am Damien from memoQ's marketing team and I will be the host of this webinar. Our presenters today are Veronica Pendy and Joel Varga, product owners at memoQ. Our webinar today will be about other new features of our latest release, memoQ 9.2. This webinar is being recorded and you will be able to find it on our YouTube channel in a few days. The session will last approximately 30 minutes, with 10 more minutes at the end for questions and answers. If you have any questions during this session, you can type them in the questions and answers panel at any time. Now it's time for me to let Veronica and Joel start this session. Thank you.
Damien, give me the screen.
Yes, now the screen is yours.
Thank you. So, Damien, I'm sharing now, right? No, not yet. Now, okay. I'm sharing now, right?
Yes, now I can see.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
So, welcome everyone. This is the POs, that is the Product Owners Guide to memoQ 9.2. And Joel and I are here to present the highlights of the release that just came out a couple of hours ago. What we are going to talk about. Hello. Okay. So here are the main topics. I will start off with password policy, which is mostly interesting for server owners, but also it may be interesting for people who are working on other people's servers. Then Joel will take over with the improvements around pre-translation, and then grammar check, and then some improvements around machine translation. So, password policy. This is a short term for how it is now allowed that a system administrator can enforce various restrictions on what type of passwords are allowed on a memoQ server. At the moment, as you probably know, administrator users are required to have fairly long and complicated passwords. But so far, for everybody else, you could just have as a password the word password or 123 or whatever. And from now, the main administrator, the reason I keep saying system administrator is because it is not a user who has administrator rights within the memoQ server, or in other words, who is part of the administrators group, but someone who has access to the machine, to the server where memoQ server as a software is installed, or in other words, a person who has access to the deployment tool. But we'll come back to that later. Before, a short recap on how and where who can change a password or enter a new one. In the desktop client, only a person, a user who is a memoQ administrator can enter a password or change a password. On the memoQ web, either an administrator can change the password of another user, or if that option is turned on, any user can set their own password themselves. And well, kind of obviously, the best option for that is when the users set their own passwords. That's the safest and that's the simplest. So project managers emailing passwords to translators is not a very good practice. So I would like to encourage everybody, even if you're not using memoQ Web for anything else, at least for users setting their own passwords, it is a good place. And it will be even more relevant a little later. So what are the two main columns or pillars of the changes now? First, the system administrators can enforce or require two main things. One of them is how a password, an allowed password, can look, how long it has to be, and what sort of characters it needs to contain. This is what we call password strength. And the other thing they can require, independent of the first one, is whether passwords expire after a bit of time. And also, if this option is turned on, they can also forbid the same password to be used over and over again. So first of all, how does it look from the user's point of view? When someone tries to enter a password, on the left, you can see how it looks in the desktop, and on the right, you can see how it looks on the web. But regardless of the actual location, when someone enters a new password, the requirements set upon passwords are displayed either very loudly or a little less loudly. But here, everybody who is entering a new password, whether it is a memoQ administrator entering a password for someone else, or a user entering a password for themselves, you can see what the requirements are. And on the right, you can see that each and every requirement is checked one by one when the password entered fulfills that requirement. The password shown here is only shown because I set it to show, for you to see that this indeed fulfills all these requirements. So this is how it looks from the user's end. How does expired password work from the user's point of view? First of all, 3 days before expiry, the user receives an email warning them that their password will expire. And then when it expires, they get another email. And this link takes them to a screen that is the same as we've seen before, where they can choose their own, change their own password. But if they fail to do so, they won't be able to log in to the server, either on the web or in the client. In both places, they are informed that they should have gotten an email about this. So quite obviously, if you turn this on, then you will either make a lot of work for your memoQ administrators, or it is very, very advisable to have memoQ web turned on and available. And also, it is very advisable to have actual working email addresses for all your users. Otherwise, they will not get these emails. And how is it set up? I would just run through it fast. So you need a system administrator, someone who can access the deployment tool. And within Configure Server, there is a new tab. And here you can see what options are available. As you see, they are all available independent of each other. So you can allow a very short password that contains everything. And you can enforce expiry independently of strong passwords as well. There are a couple of requirements, mostly around security. So secure protocol is recommended if you turn this on. And if you turn this on and also use WS API, then you must use a secure connection for that. There are technical reasons behind that, but actually using secure protocols is a good practice anyway, regardless of this whole thing. And you can turn on or off password expiry regardless of all this. And one more thing I wanted to talk about, what happens if you turn this on? At that moment, nothing happens. So the passwords that your users already had, they remain valid. We are not forcing hundreds of users to change their passwords at that second. it will only become interesting the next time they change their password. So what we suggest is, if you want to make users change their password instantly anyway, then you can manually either use reset password on them or turn on password expiry for a fairly short time. And then after they all change their password to a strong one, you can turn it off. So this was it, and I would like to ask you, so I will answer questions at the end, and I'm still asking you to put them in the question and answer place. I hope you find them. And now I give the table to George, which means I have to, stop sharing before that. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes,
I guess so.
We can hear you, yes. Thank you.
All right, so good evening. Those of you who attended memoQ Fest, you may remember that a couple of times users voiced their concerns about our pre-translation interface, and they presented a specific problem that we investigated during our user interviews, and we decided to fix it, and here it comes. So let's see what the issue is, what the problem statement is. Up until 9.1, in memoQ, when you ran a pre-translate, during the lookup section, all of the TMs and LiveDocs corpora were used. So if you wanted to change what TMs and LiveDocs corpora to use during pre-translate, you had to go back to the project settings, go to your translation memories or LiveDocs menu, unselect the ones that you did not want to include in the pre-translate, and then you had to go back to the pre-translate window, run the pre-translate, then go back again to the project home before you fired off your project to your translator, or even if you're a freelance translator, you had to go back once again to reassign and reattach those TMs and LiveDocs corpora to your project. So you had to do these steps twice, and the problem was that it was easy to get confused, because when you return to your translation memories, then obviously those that were selected were alphabetized. So you had to remember them, go down the list, select them again, and it was just really easily prone to error. So here's what we offer now. You open the pre-translate and statistics window, and as you can see under lookup, you have a new line which has TMs, LiveDocs corpora, and also select TMs and LiveDocs corpora. By default, when you open your new memoQ 9.2, by default, all projects open with all TMs and LiveDocs corpora selected. But once you click this link, then you get to this other screen where you have the chance to select the translation memories, select and unselect those that you want to use or not use during pre-translate. And the same applies to LiveDocs corpora. If you happen to be a project manager and you're running a multilingual project, you will be really happy to see that you will see the separate languages and the translation memories and LiveDocs corpora that apply to those specific languages. So once you select or deselect them, click OK, you go back here. Instead of all, you will have a number. And instead of the number 3, you will have, as you can see, although we have 4 checkboxes here, it's actually 3 corpora because we have memoQ twice, once for German and once for Hungarian. So hence the number 3 here. So once you go back here, the numbers will be updated, and you can run the pre-translate function as you would. Also, if you click the statistics tab under pre-translate, and if you have the perform statistics clicked in, then you recognize that we have a new button here. Instead of saying all project TMs and LiveDocs Corpora, you see that it's selected TMs and LiveDocs Corpora. So the statistics during PreTranslate would run only with those TMs and LiveDocs that you selected for PreTranslation. So if you go down to reports and you look for the one that was created by PreTranslation, then you will see that it's based on selected TMs and LiveDocs Corpora and not all of them. This will indicate that the results are different than running statistics outside PreTranslate, where by default all your project resources, that is TMs and LiveDocs, are used. Obviously, we've implemented it in local and online projects. You can do the same thing if you're a translator and you open a local copy of an online project. And also, if you're if you use templates, then within the templates, you can use automated actions. So for instance, after each document import, you would run the automated action PreTranslate. And under PreTranslate, you can determine which TMs and LiveDocs Corpora to use. Obviously, because we are talking about a template where you do not know in advance the names of the resources, we can only define categories here. So you can define the category working TM, or you may opt for master TM, reference TMs. Obviously, memoQ will know when it comes to the specific project which TM is a working TM, master TM, and reference TM, provided you made those selections. With LiveDocs Corpora, you can either use them or not use them. So as you can see, this new PreTranslate functionality has been applied all throughout the memoQ ecosystem. Another issue that many of our users have voiced, both in user interviews as well as during memoQ Fest, or even on the Facebook memoQ users group, was grammar check. And this is especially, hopefully it's going to be a welcome addition or a welcome new feature to memoQ by our Asian users, especially Japanese users. But all others will benefit. Let's see. So what's wrong with the current grammar check in memoQ? Most people would say that it's useless because memoQ can only tell you that a sentence is wrong. Well, yes, but I'll give you an explanation just in a second. So obviously you can see grammar errors on the grid, on the translation grid, if you check these check boxes. So you can, obviously you can decide which one to check in, but if you have both checked in, then you will see a grammar check or grammar errors both on the grid and also during grammar checking in the dialogue. But as you can see, the problem here is that in both cases, both on the grid and in the dialogue, it's only the full sentence that's highlighted. So why is it so? Are we just not really good at checking grammar errors? Well, it's not that. We actually had to trick Microsoft Office to make it work. Without getting into the technical details, it's enough to say that what you see in Word is not what Microsoft Office communicates to third-party software. So even though Word can, at the bottom of the page, you can see either Word can underline have as a grammar error because it should be has. This problem is not communicated through the Microsoft Office interop interface. Microsoft Office would only tell a third-party software whether the specific sentence is wrong or right. So the way we tricked it, we actually began to cut down words from the beginning and then the end of the sentence. So we were splitting up the sentences until the point that Microsoft would tell us that, or word would tell us that there's something wrong with the sentence. So at that point, we were able to highlight what's wrong with them. So this is what you will see in memoQ 9.2. On the grid, you will see more than what's visible in Word. Instead of just a single word, you will see, for instance, in this case, the subject word agreement. That's the issue here. So I think as a translator, you will really appreciate that memoQ will highlight not only a single word, but also the word combinations that cause the grammar error. And as you can see, these issues are identified both on the grid as well as in the dialogue. So that's how our grammar check will work. Now, moving on to our third topic is machine translation. We've updated a couple of MT services, but what's more important is that we looked at how we could improve our users' experience with machine translation workflows. One problem that we identified as quite frequent among our users was that memoQ was not really good enough in communicating to our users that the MT service that they selected did not support the specific languages that they wanted to use in. One example would be, in my case, in Hungary, would be DeepL. DeepL, for instance, does not support Hungarian. Or there are some other languages that's not supported by some other MT services. So what we decided to do is to check when the user modifies or selects or edits the MT settings resource under projects and settings. And once you're within this MT settings resource, we are going to be able to tell you if you selected an MT service that does not support the language combinations of your project. As you can see, we selected Microsoft MT plugin in this MT resource settings. So the Microsoft MT plugin service, as well as the DeepL MT plugin service. And memoQ can tell you that DeepL MT plugin does not support Hungarian Akan, Hungarian Chinese, Hungarian English, Hungarian Japanese, Hungarian Russian, simply because DeepL does not support Hungarian, period. Microsoft MT plugin supports all those languages instead of my favorite Akan. So Hungarian Akan is not supported by Microsoft MT plugin. Here, you have the choice to go back and modify your selections, or you can accept it, knowing that you will not get results from DeepL, for instance, when you're translating from Hungarian into English. This will work also when you open an online project as a translator. So in your local copy, you will see a check and you can modify your settings if you want to. And also if you edit a template and you want to add an MT service to a specific template where memoQ can see that it's going to be working from one specific language to another, and the specific MT service does not support that language combination, then memoQ will warn the user. Some of you may have experienced that memoQ is not really good at communicating some other errors. Like you can already see if you have a lookup error down at the bottom of the screen, there's this little arrow or lightning, and you can see that there's a MT lookup error, but that's it, and you don't know what to do about it. It may not be such a big issue for freelance translators or translators in general, but when you need to do some troubleshooting, especially the LSPs, language engineers, or our support specialists at memoQ, we used to be at a loss, and we had to investigate hard and fast to try and figure out what went wrong. So what we decided to do was to beef up our support for error handling in MT-related errors in memoQ, and we decided to log pretty much everything when there's something wrong with the MT workflow. So we now have a separate page in the memoQ online help. If you look for log files, you will see the exact location of your client and server log file. And that log file will include all the information about any MT related error. So even if the user interface does not tell you too much or not enough, then you can still go to this page to check where those files are. You can check those log files, and then you can either come to the conclusion that you have some setting issues, you have some local issues, or maybe you have some issues that you need to communicate to your MT service provider. So all in all, this logging of MT related errors really just helps identifying issues and then troubleshooting those issues more effectively. So these are the three areas that I wanted to discuss with you. And I guess we can now move on to the next section, which is Q&A. Back to you, Damien.
Thank you, Jean. So I think we have a first question. What happened?
We do have a couple of them.
Yes. Yes.
Actually, I thought I'd take the first one and then meanwhile Jod can read the other three.
Yes,
so Marek asked, what happened to automatic join and split during PreTranslate? The short answer is it broke. I suppose that's not everything. So it broke a while ago, and we thought we fixed it, and then during testing we found a lot of serious bugs, new issues. So we reverted the fix, and then now we think we fixed it again. It was unexpectedly difficult, and now we are trying to check it from each and every possible angle, because as it relates to statistics, thus it relates to money, your money. We want to be extra super sure that there are no more issues. I really hope it's gonna make it in January. I think it will make it to memoQ in January, but yeah, this is something we want to be extra cautious about. So this is what I can tell you about it. Jod.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Good.
Yes, we can hear you
now. Good. Let's see. We have a question that says, I really like the idea of the new pre-translation resource selection feature. I installed a test version of memoQ 9.2 and wanted to try this feature, but the option select TMs and LiveDocs Corpora does not show up. Is there some setting that needs to be changed? Well, I would check two things. One is that you have TMs and LiveDocs Corpora attached to the project. So you have to be in the project. You need to have these some resources added to the project. And then you can start the pre-translate screen. And if you selected some beforehand, then they should show up. If for some reason they don't, then please make sure that you try and install memoQ 9.2 in a different folder, but still it should work as I described. So that's to that. The next question is, where is the grammar check? Grammar check, we normally just press F7 that you can do, or you can also do this under translation. If you're in a document, then in the translation menu, In the comments and proofing section, you have a spell check window. And this is where you start the spelling and grammar check. You can either do spell check alone, or you do spelling and grammar together. You can select whether you want to use grammar check when doing the linguistic check at the end by going to options and also under options selecting spelling and grammar, and on the grammar tab you have those two checkboxes that you could see in the presentation, so you can check them or uncheck them as you wish. All right, how do you open the grammar check window? We pretty much cover the same thing. So F7 or under translation. All right. Then is there a way to use the machine pre-translation auto translate from the web feature for free? All the options I've tried demands payment. Yes, as far as I know, you need an API key to use any of the MT services. So whether it's pre-translate or on-the-fly translation when you're translating on the grid, if you want to receive hits from an MT service provider, you need to subscribe to their services. So what they offer for free is their online version, online interface. You know, Google has it, also DeepL and the others, where you can type in the text and then you will get the answer right there on the interface. So that's what's for free. You need to subscribe for MT services. Okay, Russian language interface has gone somewhere in 9.2. Yes, we have discontinued the support for Russian and I believe Polish, but I'm not sure, simply because our figures and statistics showed that we've had just very few users, even in those countries, who use their native, use the memoQ in their native tongue. So statistics showed that memoQ installations in Russia used memoQ in English rather than Russian. So that's the answer to that. Okay, we have Sasha. When I have a project with 30 languages and only want to translate from specific TM per language, I will have to manually disable all other working reference TMs, right? There is no way to enable TMs based on some search pattern, right? No, at this point, we're not, this is actually the first round of development of this pre-translate window. If this is a use case that is very common to you, I urge you to submit your feature request. And if we find that we have enough users demanding this specific feature, then we can do this. Otherwise, if you want to just deselect all the resources and then just click the single one that you want to use, it's probably the easy way around. All right, Microsoft MT offers free service up to 1 million characters. Okay, thank you, Marek. Obviously, when we teamed up with Microsoft, we were given a test API key. So apparently you can still do it for free. So there you go. Please check it out and see if it works for you. 1 million characters a month. Okay, thank you. All this fine-tuning and the new features are much appreciated, but when will we see a big thing like a new TM engine with better matching results? And that's Vevez.
Well, let me take over,
yeah.
and you can check. There are questions that only you can answer a little later.
All right.
Okay, so yeah, we are working on big things. Big things take a lot of time, and thus we don't really like to talk about them in advance, because we don't we can't really tell how much that lot of time is going to be. Some big things are definitely coming next year. I'm not saying another big thing is coming for each and every type of user we have. We are still trying to make features for each and every type of user that we have. And we cannot do it in each and every release. But big things are cooking. So as for when will we see, I can say next year. And that's all I can say. And as for what will be the final minor version of the 9.x build, this is connected. So we will have 10.0 when the next big thing is done. So this is once again something I cannot tell in advance. We tend to change the big version only when we absolutely have to break compatibility between two versions. But that will most probably happen during 2020. And once again, I can't tell you anything more exact simply because I don't know. Go ahead, George.
All right, so there's this question. Sometimes when we pre-translate with MT, some segments are skipped, maybe a timeout error, or not sure why. Is it possible to see in the log if any segments were skipped during pre-translation with MT? Yes, you should be able to see in the log if PreTranslate found any issues. Most typically, you would encounter those issues when a specific MT service cannot take in segments comprised of more than, I don't know, 1,000 characters or even more. And during PreTranslate, we actually send batches of segments. So normally like 10 segments at a time. And if one happens to be too long, that would just exceed the limit for a single batch, then the MT service provider may refuse to translate those 10 sentences. So for instance, with Microsoft MT plugin, we had this issue a few months ago, I think, or a couple of months ago. And we actually did some development to make sure that if there is an issue like this, then only that specific segment will not be translated that causes this issue. That is, out of those 10 segments, only one will not be translated and 9 will be still translated by the MT service provider. With DeepL, we also have a similar issue. We found that in certain cases, I'm not sure when, long sentences over sometimes 800 characters, sometimes more than 1,100 characters are not returned. They do not return translations from DeepL. So we are working on it, but it appears to be an issue on DeepL's side. So yes, we know about these issues, and sometimes we can fix them, sometimes we can't. Any chance of seeing a future version of memoQ in the Croatian language? Well, I guess it depends on the number of users who buy memoQ in Croatia. So if the number will grow really high, then maybe. But it's very telling that we have just discontinued the support for Polish and Russian simply because our data indicated that the number of memoQ users using the software in those languages simply did not justify the efforts it takes to translate the memoQ interface into separate languages. So it's really, there are a lot of things to consider when we commit to a new UI language, but you never know. I mean, you need to start a campaign, I guess. All right, when will MT results take our TB results into consideration? Patch match, any plans? Good news, if you subscribe, Microsoft MT already has the custom an MT model that supports this option. So you can upload term bases or glossaries, but that's obviously not the same what the user is talking about. We have been approached by one of the MT service providers to work out a deal where the specific TB results will be sent along with the source segment to help translate the sentences with the correct terminology. So it's in the process. And as far as I know, we are working on Amazon MT, which is scheduled to be released with our next release, that is 9.3 in the spring. We are still working on it, but Amazon is supposed to support attaching terminology and then uploading it to your account. So whenever you translate, Amazon will take into account those terminology suggestions. Amazon, by the way, is already available via Intento. Intento, which became a public MT plugin in memoQ 9.1. And as you may have remembered from our last webinar, Intento is like an MT gateway that offers you a wide array of MT services and even a smart routing option. So you might want to check out the Intento website and also the Intento MT plugin. Maybe they will help you meet your needs. Let's see, Vena, you have, I think, one more. Ooh, we have lots and lots of new issues. Veva, would you like to take
Yeah,
over?
just a second.
Or I can still continue. I
Sorry, I just muted myself.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I tend to type very loudly. So we have a couple of questions around different operating systems like iOS and also Linux. We definitely are not going to come out with a full iOS or Linux version. It basically means writing the full software once again from the ground up. And as if you look around in the software industry, basically wherever there is a client that is available on all operating systems, most of the time it is browser based. So that may be an option to go, but similarly as with Croatian, and there was also a question about Portuguese. The value we can add to customers is just not as much as it would cost. So separate iOS, separate operating system means a full rewrite of the whole software, and the UI contains an amount of text in tens of thousands of words. So I think we are in the same industry. You can calculate how much that costs. And the ratio of users, even in those countries, was very low. The ratio of users using memoQ in Russian or Portuguese or Polish, and I can check the ratio of people from Croatia using memoQ, but to be honest, I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you. So, Zsolt.
There's a question about Linux.
Yeah, I think I answered Linux.
Okay,
Linux
all right.
is a different operating system.
Okay, all right. So I'm taking over. Will Google Auto-ML likely to be supported in MT plugins in 9.3? The answer is no, not that early. We are not that far away. Well, from our perspective, we are not that far away from code freeze for 9.3. So it's not going to be in there. But the good news is, once again, the Intento MT plugin supports Google AutoML. So I really encourage anyone who's into MT to visit the Intento website. They can subscribe to their services. They have a very good, down to the second statistical system. You can track your MT usage, and it's really, it really works like a charm as far as I know, and as far as I tested during the developments. Do you have plans for broader dictation support? I mean, a separate interface only for issuing out voice commands other than Hey memoQ? No, not at this point. We will probably invest some more in Hey memoQ, but no more dictation as far as I can see on the immediate roadmap. All right. I totally understand about the UI, small markets and all that. Thank you, said Goran Puyas. Well, thank you for your understanding. We really appreciate that, and sorry to be unable to give you better news. And as far as I can see, that's probably it. No more open questions. Back to you, Damien.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we actually reached the end of the session. So thank you, Veronica and Zsolt, for this presentation. And thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. And so, yeah, I will send you an email with the recording of the webinar. I would say that you will have it either tomorrow or on Monday. So thank you again, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.